Two names. Two legends. One question that has never stopped sparking debate. Bruce Lee versus Steven Seagal. On one side, a man whose speed redefined what the human body could do. A fighter so fast, cameras had to slow him down just to capture his movement. On the other, a master of calm control. A fighter who doesn't chase, doesn't rush, doesn't panic. He waits. For decades, fans, fighters, and experts have argued about this exact matchup. Could raw speed overpower calculated control? Or would patience and technique shut everything down? Because this isn't just a fight. It's a clash of philosophies. Bruce Lee believed in adaptability. Be water, he said, flow, adjust, strike without warning. Steven Seagal represents something very different. Structure, balance, redirection. He doesn't meet force with force. He absorbs it and sends it back. Now imagine this. A quiet room. No crowd. No rules. Just two men standing across from each other. Bruce Lee, light on his feet, eyes locked, every muscle ready to explode. Steven Seagal, still, grounded, barely moving, but watching everything. No words. No warning. Just one moment, and then, movement. Too fast to fully see. Too precise to waste. This is where the debate begins. Because if Bruce Lee strikes first, it could be over instantly. But if Steven Seagal gets a hold of him, just one grip, one redirection, everything changes. So the real question isn't just who is stronger. It's this. Who controls the moment? Speed or timing? Explosion or patience? Because in a real fight, you don't get a second chance. And when these two worlds collide, only one walks away. Backhand index pointing right. So before we break this down, who do you think wins? To understand who would win this fight, you first have to understand the men behind it. Because Bruce Lee and Steven Seagal weren't just fighters. They were complete opposites. Bruce Lee didn't follow tradition. He broke it. At a time when martial arts were rigid, structured, and locked into centuries-old systems, Bruce Lee did something no one expected. He questioned everything. Why follow fixed patterns? Why limit yourself to one style? Why not take what works and discard what doesn't? That thinking led to the creation of Jeet Kune Do. Not a style, but a philosophy. It was built for real combat. Speed over form. Efficiency over beauty. Adaptability over rules. Bruce Lee trained his body to react without hesitation. No wasted movement. No unnecessary steps. Every strike had purpose. Every motion had intent. He studied boxing, fencing, wrestling, blending them into something unpredictable, something dangerous, and most importantly, something real. Now look at Steven Seagal. His path was completely different. Seagal didn't reject tradition. He mastered it. Aikido. A discipline focused on balance, redirection, and control. Instead of attacking first, Aikido teaches you to wait. To let your opponent make the mistake. To use their force against them. Where Bruce Lee moves forward, Seagal stands still. Where Bruce Lee strikes, Seagal redirects. It's not about overpowering someone. It's about unbalancing them. One wrong step. One overcommitment. And suddenly, you're not standing anymore. That's the essence of Seagal's approach. Calm, patient, calculated. But here's where things get interesting. Because Aikido, while powerful in theory, depends on one key factor. The opponent must engage. They must reach. They must grab. They must commit. And Bruce Lee doesn't fight like that. He doesn't overextend. He doesn't give openings easily. He strikes fast and pulls back even faster. In many ways, Bruce Lee's style was designed to avoid exactly the kind of control Aikido relies on. And that creates a problem. Because if Seagal can't establish contact, he can't apply his technique. But if Bruce Lee miscalculates even once, if he gets too close, too aggressive, too confident, that's all Seagal needs. One moment, one grip, one shift in balance, and the fight could flip instantly. So now we have two completely different systems. One built on speed, pressure, and unpredictability. The other built on patience, timing, and control. This isn't just striker versus grappler. This is chaos versus structure. And in a real fight, only one approach survives. Backhand index pointing right. So now that you know how they fight, which style do you trust more? Now that we understand their philosophies, it's time to break down what really matters in a fight. Strengths. Because when Bruce Lee faces Steven Seagal, this isn't about hype. It's about what each man actually brings into that moment. Let's start with Bruce Lee. His biggest advantage? Speed. Not just fast. Explosively fast. Bruce Lee's strikes weren't designed to look impressive. They were designed to land before you even realized what happened. His famous one-inch punch wasn't about power alone. It was about efficiency, maximum impact, minimum movement. He trained his reflexes to a level where hesitation simply didn't exist. See an opening, attack instantly. No pause, no second guessing. But speed alone isn't what made him dangerous. It was control, distance control, timing control, fight control. Bruce Lee didn't just throw strikes. He dictated when and where the fight happened. He could close distance in a split second and disappear just as fast. That's a nightmare for any opponent, especially someone who relies on contact. Now let's talk about Steven Seagal. Because his strength isn't obvious, but it's real. Control. Not flashy, not explosive, but extremely effective, under the right conditions. Seagal's Aikido is built on one principle. Use the opponent's force against them. That means he doesn't need to be faster than you. He just needs you to move first. When someone attacks, they create momentum. And momentum can be redirected. A wrist grab turns into a lock. A push turns into a throw. A strike turns into a takedown. It all happens in one continuous motion. And once it starts, it's very hard to stop. Seagal's strength lies in that transition. From defense to complete control. But here's the critical detail. It requires connection. He needs to touch you, hold you, feel your movement. Without that, his system can't activate. And that's where the contrast becomes dangerous. Because Bruce Lee doesn't stay in range. He enters fast, strikes sharp, then exits, hit and gone. That kind of movement disrupts rhythm. It prevents setups. It removes the very thing Aikido depends on, engagement. But don't underestimate Seagal. If Bruce Lee misjudges distance even once, if he lingers just a fraction too long, that's all it takes. One grip, one lock, one off-balance moment. And suddenly, speed doesn't matter anymore. Now it's about leverage. And leverage doesn't care how fast you are. It only cares about positioning. So here's what we're really looking at. Bruce Lee brings speed, precision, and control of space. Steven Seagal brings patience, timing, and control of the opponent. One dominates before contact. The other dominates after contact. And that creates a very clear line. If the fight stays at distance, Bruce Lee has the advantage. If it closes into a clinch, Seagal becomes dangerous. Two strengths, two conditions, two completely different outcomes. Backhand index pointing right, so the real question is, who forces the fight into their world first? Now comes the moment everyone has been waiting for. No more theory. No more breakdowns. Just the fight. Bruce Lee versus Steven Seagal. A quiet space. No crowd. No distractions. Just tension. Bruce Lee stands light on his feet. Balanced, focused, ready. Every muscle relaxed, but prepared to explode in an instant. Across from him, Steven Seagal barely moves. Feet planted. Posture solid. Eyes calm. He isn't reacting. He's waiting. Because that's what he does best. He lets the moment come to him. Seconds pass. No one speaks. No one moves. And then, Bruce Lee steps in. Not slow. Not cautious. Fast. A sudden burst of speed aimed to close the distance before Seagal can even process it. A sharp jab shoots forward, direct, precise, efficient. But Seagal doesn't counter with a strike. He shifts. Just slightly. His body turns. His hand rises. Not to block, but to feel. This is where everything changes. Because Bruce Lee doesn't stop. He follows immediately. Another strike, faster this time. Then another. A combination designed to overwhelm. Pressure. Speed. Relentless momentum. Each movement flows into the next. There's no pause. No reset. This is Bruce Lee's world. Controlled chaos. And for a moment, it works. Seagal is forced backward. Adjusting. Reading. Absorbing. He doesn't panic. But he doesn't fully engage either. Not yet. Because he's waiting for something very specific. Commitment. Bruce Lee steps in again. Closer this time. Closer than before. And that's the opening. Seagal reaches. Not aggressively, but precisely. His hand connects. Just for a split second. But that's all he needs. He turns his wrist. Shifts his weight. And suddenly, the entire dynamic changes. Bruce Lee's forward motion is no longer his own. It's being redirected. Pulled slightly offline. Not a full grab. Not a full lock. But enough to disrupt. For the first time, Bruce Lee is forced to react. He pivots. Quick. Sharp. Controlled. breaking the contact before it can fully develop. And just like that, he's gone again. Distance re-established. This is the danger. This is the line. Every exchange is a risk. Every step forward could be an advantage. Or a mistake. Bruce Lee circles. Light. Fast. Unpredictable. He changes angles. Doesn't attack immediately. Because now he knows. Seagal isn't just standing still. He's setting traps. Waiting for that one moment where speed turns into overcommitment. And Seagal? He stays grounded. Patient. He doesn't chase Bruce Lee. He doesn't rush forward. Because chasing breaks structure. And structure is everything. Another pause. Another breath. Then, Bruce Lee explodes again. This time from a different angle. A feint. Followed by a real strike. Faster than before. More deceptive. Seagal reacts. He tries to connect. But Bruce Lee pulls back just in time. No contact. No grip. No control. And that's the problem. Because without that connection, Seagal can't finish. And without finishing, he's stuck defending. The pace increases. Bruce Lee pushes forward. In and out. Striking and disappearing. Each attack forcing Seagal to adjust. Each second making it harder to stay perfectly balanced. And here's what becomes clear. Seagal is dangerous. But only in very specific moments. Bruce Lee is dangerous. All the time. The longer the fight stays in motion, the more it favors speed. The more it favors unpredictability. The more it favors Bruce Lee. But one mistake. One single miscalculation. And everything could still change. Because Seagal only needs one. One grip. One redirection. One perfect moment. And the fight could end instantly. So now we're right on the edge. Speed versus timing. Pressure versus patience. And neither man has fully taken control. Not yet. Backhand index pointing right so as the tension builds. Who do you think breaks first? At this point, the fight is no longer about style versus style. It's about reality. Because when you compare Bruce Lee and Steven Seagal, you're not just comparing two martial artists. You're comparing two different eras of thinking about combat. And reality doesn't care about reputation. It cares about what actually works when things get unpredictable. Let's start with Bruce Lee again. His entire system was built on one core idea. Adaptation under pressure. He trained to remove hesitation completely. No fixed patterns. No predictable sequences. If something doesn't work, change it instantly. That mindset makes him extremely dangerous in fast exchanges. Because in real combat, hesitation is often what gets people hurt. Bruce Lee's ability to read distance, react instantly, and switch strategies mid-movement gives him a huge advantage in chaotic situations. But here's the reality check. Speed has limits. Even the fastest fighter in the world still has to operate within human reaction time. And no matter how fast you are, you still have to enter range to land a strike. Now let's shift to Steven Seagal. Seagal's system is often misunderstood. People see Aikido and assume it's passive. But in reality, its strength lies in structure under pressure. Aikido is built around the idea that aggression creates openings. When someone attacks, they expose balance. When they overextend, they lose control of their center. When they commit too hard, they become predictable. Seagal's goal is to turn that moment into control. Not by meeting force with force, but by redirecting it. In theory, this is powerful. In controlled environments, it can look effortless. But real fights are rarely controlled. They are fast, messy, and unpredictable. And that's where the debate becomes interesting. Because Bruce Lee's system thrives in chaos. But Seagal's system thrives in structure. So what happens when chaos meets structure? Let's break it down honestly. If Bruce Lee maintains distance and rhythm control, Seagal struggles to establish his grip-based techniques. Because without contact, Aikido doesn't fully activate. But if Seagal manages to absorb or intercept even one committed attack, the fight changes instantly. Not gradually. Instantly. That's the reality of grappling-based control systems. They don't need many chances. They need one. One successful entry. One moment of imbalance. One transition from striking range to close contact. And then physics takes over. But Bruce Lee's style was designed specifically to prevent that transition. He understood range better than most fighters of his time. He didn't just hit hard. He hit from angles that made counter-grappling difficult. He used footwork to stay just outside reach. He didn't linger in danger zones. That's a major advantage in a real fight scenario. Because most grappling systems require sustained contact to fully develop. Now let's address something important. Honestly, there's a lot of myth surrounding both men. Bruce Lee is often portrayed as unbeatable. Seagal is often debated for how effective his techniques would be in modern competitive fighting environments. But reality is simpler than mythology. No fighter is unbeatable. No system is perfect. Every style has conditions where it shines, and conditions where it struggles. Bruce Lee's weakness is overextension in pursuit of speed. Steven Seagal's weakness is dependency on engagement timing. So if we remove fantasy and look at real-world logic, a fight between them becomes a question of who can force their conditions first. Bruce Lee wants distance, tempo, and unpredictability. Seagal wants contact, structure, and control. And in real combat, forcing conditions is everything. Because you don't always get the fight you want, you get the fight you can create. If Bruce Lee controls space consistently, Seagal may never get the entry he needs. But if Seagal absorbs pressure and waits patiently enough, even one opening could flip everything. This is why debates like this never end. Because both outcomes are logically possible under different circumstances. And that's the truth most people miss. Fighting is not static. It's dynamic. It changes every second. A single step forward can decide everything. A single hesitation can end everything. So instead of asking who is better overall, the real question becomes, under which conditions does each man dominate? And in that sense, both are extremely dangerous. Just in different ways. Backhand index pointing right. So now that we've stripped away myths and looked at reality, at this stage of the breakdown, the argument stops being theoretical. Because when you place Bruce Lee and Steven Seagal into a real-world scenario, you're no longer asking who looks better on paper. You're asking who actually controls the outcome when pressure becomes real. And that answer depends on one thing above everything else. Who dictates the fight? Not who is stronger. Not who is more famous. Not who has the cleaner technique. But who controls distance, timing, and rhythm when chaos starts. Let's reconstruct the final phase of the confrontation. Both fighters are still standing across from each other. No hesitation now. No testing. No guessing. Each one has already learned what the other represents. Bruce Lee understands Seagal's goal: contact, control, and redirection. Steven Seagal understands Bruce Lee's goal: speed, disruption, and constant motion. So now the fight becomes strategic at the highest level. Bruce Lee makes the first move again. But this time it's not a full commitment. It's layered. A feint. A step forward that looks like an attack, but isn't. This is important because Bruce Lee's real advantage isn't just speed. It's deception. He forces reactions without committing fully. That creates hesitation in the opponent. And hesitation breaks timing. Seagal responds carefully. He doesn't overextend. He doesn't chase the feint. He waits. Because waiting is how he avoids traps. But waiting also comes with a cost. Every second that passes without engagement is a second Bruce Lee controls the rhythm. Now the pace shifts. Bruce Lee circles. Angles change rapidly. Left, right, up. He never stays in one predictable lane. This creates pressure. Not physical pressure but psychological pressure. Because Seagal cannot fully predict the entry point. And unpredictability reduces the effectiveness of structured counters. But Seagal is not passive. He adjusts position constantly. Subtle footwork. Small shifts in stance. He's trying to keep alignment. Trying to maintain balance. Trying to stay ready for the moment Bruce Lee overcommits. Because that is still his win condition. One mistake. One overstep. One attack that comes too close. That is all he needs. Now the tension builds again. Bruce Lee increases pace. Short bursts of movement. Sharp entries followed by immediate exits. He's testing reactions. Looking for timing gaps. Trying to force Seagal to respond early. Because early response equals vulnerability. But Seagal resists. He does not bite. He does not rush. He absorbs the rhythm change. And that patience matters. Because in real combat logic, emotional control is a weapon. But there's a hidden truth here. Patience only works if you survive long enough to use it. And Bruce Lee's pressure makes that survival difficult. Now imagine the critical moment. Bruce Lee suddenly closes distance. Not fully committing but entering just enough to provoke a reaction. Seagal responds. This is it. The moment both systems are designed for. Seagal reaches for control. Not forcefully but precisely. He attempts to establish contact. A wrist. An arm. Any point of control. But Bruce Lee immediately shifts. He doesn't stay in the line of engagement. He rotates out. Breaks alignment. Resets distance. No grip is fully secured. No control is established. And just like that, the moment resets. This is the pattern now. Entry. Reaction. Escape. Reset. Entry. reaction, skip, reset. Each cycle favors Bruce Lee slightly more because he dictates when the cycle begins. But Seagal's danger still exists. Because every time Bruce Lee enters range, even briefly, he risks the exact moment Seagal is waiting for. A clean connection. A full control point. A completed entry. That is the turning point condition. So now we arrive at the decision layer. What actually determines the outcome? It's not strength. It's not technique alone. It's not even speed or control individually. It's consistency under pressure. Bruce Lee's system relies on maintaining continuous disruption. If he slows down, he loses advantage. Steven Seagal's system relies on patience and timing precision. If the opponent never commits, he struggles to activate control. So the fight becomes a race of conditions. Can Bruce Lee keep the tempo high enough to prevent engagement? Or can Seagal stay patient long enough to force a mistake? This is the core truth. Bruce Lee wins through denial of structure. Seagal wins through exploitation of error. And in most realistic scenarios, denial of structure is harder to break than waiting for a perfect mistake. Because perfect mistakes don't happen often against elite movement. But continuous pressure creates fatigue, hesitation, and micro-errors over time. And micro-errors are all it takes. So when we strip away emotion, bias, and mythology, we reach a simple conclusion. If the fight stays dynamic, fluid, and movement-based, Bruce Lee controls more of it. If the fight slows, stabilizes, and enters grappling range, Seagal becomes dangerous instantly. But the difficulty is this. Bruce Lee is very unlikely to allow the fight to slow down in the first place. Backhand index pointing right, so now the final question emerges. Do you think patience can overcome constant motion? In the final stage of this imagined confrontation between Bruce Lee and Steven Seagal, something important becomes clear. This was never just a fight about who wins. It was a fight about what winning even means in the first place. Because when you remove the spectacle, the internet debates, and the mythology surrounding both men, you're left with something much more grounded. Two completely different interpretations of combat philosophy. And both are built around survival. Now imagine the final moments of this encounter. The intensity has already peaked. Both fighters have tested distance. Both have tested timing. Both have felt the other's rhythm. And now, there is no surprise left. Only execution. Bruce Lee stands slightly angled, light on his feet, constantly shifting weight. He is still active. Still unpredictable. Still refusing to give a fixed target. Seagal remains grounded. Still calm. Still patient. Still waiting for the exact moment where commitment becomes vulnerability. But something has changed now. Because after multiple exchanges, both fighters understand the pattern. Bruce Lee controls when the exchange begins. Seagal controls what happens if contact is made. So the entire fight becomes a question of whether contact ever stabilizes long enough to matter. Bruce Lee moves first again. But this time it is not reckless. It is measured aggression. A controlled entry. A probing strike meant not to finish, but to test response under pressure. Seagal reacts immediately. Not with panic, but with structure. He shifts his stance, trying to align his center, preparing to redirect if needed. But Bruce Lee doesn't stay. He exits instantly after the strike. No commitment. No linger. No opportunity. This is the core pattern now. Entry, disruption, exit. And every cycle reinforces one idea. Bruce Lee refuses to be held. Now Seagal adjusts slightly. He begins to shorten the distance himself, not rushing but reducing space. Because waiting at long range is no longer enough. He needs proximity. But proximity against someone like Bruce Lee is dangerous. Because closing distance without control exposes you to speed-based counters. Still, Seagal advances carefully. Step by step. He is trying to compress the space where Bruce Lee operates. If he can limit movement, he can force engagement. And for the first time, the distance tightens. Not fully closed, but narrowed. The atmosphere changes. The exchanges become shorter, faster, more dangerous. Bruce Lee senses it immediately. He increases lateral movement. Angles widen. Footwork becomes sharper. He refuses to be trapped in a straight line. Because straight lines favor grappling entry. And Seagal's entire system depends on linear engagement at the right moment. Then it happens. A brief collision of intentions. Bruce Lee steps in. Seagal steps forward simultaneously. For a split second, their ranges overlap. This is the most critical moment of the entire scenario. Because this is where both systems attempt activation at the same time. Bruce Lee attempts to strike and exit. Seagal attempts to connect and control. But neither completes the cycle cleanly. Bruce Lee pivots out of range before full contact stabilizes. Seagal reaches, but the timing is just slightly off. Not enough for control. Not enough for a finish. And just like that, the moment passes. This is the truth of high-level combat exchanges. Most decisive moments are not dramatic finishes. They are near connections. Almost controls. Missed opportunities by fractions of timing. And that is what defines this matchup. Bruce Lee continues to dominate the pace of engagement. Seagal continues to remain dangerous in any moment where contact stabilizes. But stability never fully arrives. Now, as the scenario reaches its conclusion, something becomes obvious. There is no single clean ending. No knockout moment. No dramatic submission. Because both systems are designed to avoid being fully solved in a single exchange. Instead, the outcome is defined by probability under pressure. If we step back and interpret this realistically, Bruce Lee's approach reduces the number of times Seagal can safely engage. Every failed entry attempt costs Seagal timing, positioning, and balance adjustment. Over time, that compounds. Seagal's approach, however, keeps the threat of instant reversal alive. Because if Bruce Lee ever overcommits, even slightly, the entire fight could shift. That is the paradox. Now, zooming out completely. What does this actually mean? It means this debate was never about a guaranteed winner. It was about conditions. And conditions change everything. In a controlled environment with strict engagement rules, Seagal's structured redirection becomes far more viable. In an open, dynamic environment with continuous movement and unpredictability, Bruce Lee's system gains overwhelming advantage. But real fights rarely give you ideal conditions. They give you chaos. And chaos tends to favor adaptability over rigidity. Still, even that is not absolute. Because structure under control can punish mistakes instantly. So the final truth is not simple. It is layered. Bruce Lee represents constant motion, pressure, and unpredictability. Seagal represents timing, patience, and control through reaction. One overwhelms the system. The other punishes the mistake. And both rely on human error existing at some point. So what is the real conclusion? It is this. There is no perfect fighter. Only systems that perform differently under different conditions. And when people debate who wins, they are often unknowingly asking a deeper question. Which philosophy do you trust more when things become unpredictable? Do you trust continuous pressure that prevents control from forming? Or do you trust patience that waits for the smallest opening to change everything? That is the real takeaway. Not a victory. Not a defeat. But an understanding. Because once you remove ego from the argument, both men represent mastery in their own domains. And mastery is never about domination alone. It is about survival through principles. Backhand index pointing right, so now the debate returns to you. In a real unpredictable situation, do you trust speed that never stops? Or patience that only needs one moment? Speech balloon, what's your final verdict?